I'm your cult boyfriend. We're talking about The Lost Boys today, a 1987 film directed by Joel Schumacher. I think it's Joel Schumacher's best film. It's the only Joel Schumacher film that I think I love without question and without a lot of criticisms either. I think it's a monumental work. I think it's a phenomenal film. What I find most interesting about The Lost Boys are the queer undertones, the queer subtext of the whole piece. You can often find queer subtext in the work of Joel Schumacher, but I think it's most palpable and most erotic and even most horrific within The Lost Boys, most urgent within The Lost Boys. The vampire is an interesting metaphor. The vampire, of course, started within film as a sort of anti-Semitic caricature. It's personified within F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu. From there, we go to Bela Lugosi with the vaguely Eastern European foreigner who wanted to come over here and seduce all of our women. Vampires mean different things at different times. I think that the next huge advancement within the vampire metaphor came in the 80s and 90s with the invention of the androgynous vampire, of the gay vampire. Of course, with works like The Lost Boys, which we're talking about today, as well as the novels of Anne Rice, and the future Interview with the Vampire film made by Neil Jordan, and of course, Fright Night, which came out around the same time as The Lost Boys. The vampire metaphor came to symbolize something deeply queer and deeply erotic. There was something wrong with our blood. HIV, it was transferable, and the people who belonged to the vampires associated themselves with a different kind of not only rebellious but dangerous alternative lifestyle. The vampire metaphor often seems to encapsulate a certain sort of fear within the audience that masks itself as sexual morbid curiosity from Bela Lugosi all the way up to Kiefer Sutherland and The Lost Boys. And I think Kiefer Sutherland is the most impressive thing about this film. David, I think, is one of the greatest villains in horror movies. This definitely makes him one of the most interesting and provocative characters within all of teen cinema. David's an incredible character who I couldn't imagine anyone else playing this role apart from Kiefer Sutherland. Sutherland is able to communicate so much, like universes of meaning and themes and style, just with expressions, even and inflections of his voice, his speech patterns. He's a very interesting actor. I think that David is a performance that is flawless for all intents and purposes. I thought that Star was excellent as well, played by Jamie Gertz. I think that Jamie Gertz and Kiefer Sutherland, they are hitting all of my bisexual triggers. I think they're both incredibly sexy in the film. And there's a metaphorical value to their pairing as well. Star is literally David's stars. She's the star of David. It's the visceral sexual energy that exists between Michael and David that is, I think, the most enduring thing about the film. The seduction of Michael within this homoerotic atmosphere, within this, I think, finely amplified queer atmosphere that is David's group, David's gang, David's atmosphere. I think it's a phenomenal experience. David is given a spotlight as the ultimate queer metaphor in this film. I think there are subtleties to the queer subtext. I mean, it's in a lot of different places. Sam has a poster, a very sexy poster of Rob Lowe on his wall that's never mentioned, it's never really focused on. The ultra hedonistic camaraderie that can be seen within the group of our four primary vampires. I think you can only call that extremely queer, and I love it. The film is making a lot of statements about what happens to the eternally missing teenager, unending, unaging symbols of sexual rebellion and youthful decadence. The film likes to be extremely fun. It is a very comedic film as well, and I don't think that the comedy interferes at all with the more horrific elements. David is a very intimidating, imposing, and I think occasionally terrifying figure. The comedy of the piece does not interfere with the horrifics. It is potently both scary and amusing. It's a very good teen film. It's a very good teen horror film. It's a film that possesses a few fantastical elements that only seem to elevate the more anarchic trappings of the piece. I love the hideout. I love the lair. I love David's lair with Jim Morrison painted on the wall, or the huge Jim Morrison mosaic on the wall. And I love that Jason Patrick's Michael bears a striking resemblance to Jim Morrison, and that sometimes we would do these like crosscuts or fades, these kind of musical montages where Michael's face would be superimposed onto the Jim Morrison poster in the back that would soon turn into a couple different David superimpositions sweeping by. It's always like we're looking at the history of rock and roll, the history of degeneracy, or the history of rebellion, or the history of sexual liberation, and there's always that kind of demonic, hedonistic, murderous quality to it. That's what makes it kind of a horror film, right? Like that's what makes it an actual horror film because David is this horrific element that is the subtext of every great advancement within sexuality and within teenage youth character. There is always that hedonistic and ultra violent murderous quality that is the subtext of all of it. There's a lot of cool visual poetics here. This is Joel Schumacher's finest film, in every dimension. The subtext is beautiful. The text itself is sincere, and there's a lot of just physical poetry going on. There's a lot of rhyming imagery going on. There's a lot of greatness here. It's Joel Schumacher at his very best. Everything that Joel Schumacher does, it's perfected in this film. And I do think Joel Schumacher was a queer filmmaker who had a lot to say about queerness, and I think a lot of honest things to say about queerness because he's certainly he's a huge voice of Gen X. His voice would be entirely out of place now. And I think that's a pity because I think Joel Schumacher's queer subtext was startlingly sensual, was erotic, and I feel that queer movies made now that are even more deliberately queer or even more like upfront about its queerness lack the certain kind of dangerous sexuality, the dangerous sexiness that existed in Joel Schumacher's work, especially within The Lost Boys. The Lost Boys, I think, is a beautiful kind of queer film because it makes queerness sexy. It makes queerness unknown. It makes queerness visceral, and it makes queerness just erotic, without ever losing the horrific sensibilities of eroticism itself, since it's tapping into some very primal areas that all good horror interacts with. Lost Boys is sincerely very close to masterful. I love the film entirely. I think the music is lovely. I brought up Jim Morrison earlier, and I think that People Are Strange, the usage of it in this film is outrageously good. Provides you with an instant mood and an instant atmosphere and a sort of poetic creepiness that the Lost Boys never lets go of. And I also love, cry, little sister, thou shalt not. Like, it's so fucking good, man. Because those stings, those thou shall not stings, especially when, like, David's dying and he literally has a spotlight on his metaphor, it's perfect. It's perfect, and of course, the ultimate villain is an overbearing father figure or authority figure who believes very much in discipline from Gilmore Girls. So it's lovely seeing a Gilmore Girls alum here, Gilmore Girls All-Star, as well, I guess the ultimate form of Dracula in the film. And I always thought that his character had he was kind of like queer-coded as well. But really, it all comes back to the triumvirate for me. That dastardly, deathly, and delicious trio of David, Michael, and Star, I think that their dynamic, the way that they play off of each other, the kind of self-destructive sexiness of all of them is bafflingly uh, delirious to interact with. I love it. Like I'm intoxicated by those three characters, and I always have been. Every time I've watched the movie, I'm intoxicated by David's atmosphere. I'm intoxicated by Star's physical perfection. I'm intoxicated by Michael's desperate plunge into nihilism itself. I am intoxicated by the three of them, and I love them to death. That that is teen art. That is teen poetry, and it's one of the finest trios that we've ever seen in film. The way that the three of them interact with each other is truly marvelous and magical. Yeah, The Lost Boys rules. It's great. You also have to love seeing the two Corys here, right? You have to love Corey Haim and Corey Feldman. I think this is the best film that features the both of them together as well. They had a sort of a bizarre but albeit legendary chemistry, and it was nice seeing it here. Diane Wiest, she's always so sweet. She gave such a sweet performance. All things considered, The Lost Boys isn't only like a great film. It isn't simply Joel Schumacher's best film. I think it's one of the best offerings of Gen X cinema. I think it's one of the finest teen movies of the 80s, and that's saying an awful lot. There were so many great films within the 80s because the 80s, that's when teen movies actually became artful, became true pieces of art, and The Lost Boys truly is a true piece of art. Thank you for watching.